All right, and I'm going to go right to the live page on LinkedIn. Can you check on your phone, Tancha, that it's working? Perfect, thank you. Yes. All right, and excellent. We are very much live. Is it working on your ends? Excellent.
Yes.
All right, so welcome everybody, and welcome to our Navigating Change webinar. Today, we are going to explore conscious closing. My name is Desi Jagger, and I'm a certified leadership coach. I have helped teams and leaders to navigate complex change, such as post-merger integration and organizational restructure.
And I'm Tanya Dasheva. I'm a change management consultant, and I help organizations navigate change in their organizational process and behavior change programs so that they can reach their next maturity level.
Now, change may be difficult, but it doesn't have to be painful. This is why Tanya and I have partnered together to bring you tools and insights on managing change and transition, starting with this LinkedIn live webinar, which we run every month. Tanya brings the consulting perspective, whilst I focus on the coaching aspect. We have a combined work experience of 35 years from multinational organizations across the globe. Most importantly, we're passionate about empowering teams and leaders so they don't just survive through change, but instead grow, learn, and thrive. Today, we are talking about the conscious closing of a chapter. So let's begin with defining that. Now, Tanya, in the context of organizational change, for example, a merger and acquisition, what does conscious closing mean?
I love talking about conscious closing because it has a lot to do with change. And when we talk about conscious closing, is one that is planned, is orchestrated. So a merger and acquisition or a big organizational change doesn't happen like this for the organization by default. There are discussions, there are negotiations, there are conversations, and a number of people are usually involved, mostly from leadership from higher levels of our organization in that new phase of the organization. What happens often is when we have a big change happening for a big organization, we have a small amount of people that might be involved in it for a longer period of time, from the initial conversation that we might take that route as an organization to the moment where the big leader or the sponsor of that change is to make the big announcement to the hundreds or thousands of people in that organization. Conscious closing of a organizational chapter is where the leaders not just create the design of that new chapter, but also do the actual change management approach and planning with it. What it means, consciously, you provide a transition for your employees so that they can consciously move from, oh, this is how we're doing things today, to we're going to be doing them differently from tomorrow. Especially when it's, if you ask me on a personal level what a conscious closing would mean, I would say this would refer to closing something on my own terms. In the organizational environment, an employee not necessarily has that power, that freedom, because it's a bigger community, it's a bigger agenda than their own situation. And on organizational level, I would say conscious closing is when leadership takes into consideration all of the questions, all of the difficulties for the employees, and are able, have the program to address most of them, of course, to address their concerns, to hear them, to support them in that transition. And from that perspective, from the moment when the announcement is made to the full organization, there is a plan that each employee can already be part of, consciously created plan to help them move through that transition, given whether they would stay in the new chapter of the organization, whether they would not stay, what would that mean for them? But having that plan already activates, let's say, the closing in a much more conscious and constructive manner.
Yeah,
It's
what
a
I'm hearing you talk
definition, messy,
about.
but I don't have one sentence.
No, we're exploring here. So what I'm hearing, two key things is conscious closing is about having intentional closing, being deliberate in the design and also the planning of whatever organizational transition is happening. So with that in mind, as you mentioned many times, the majority of people in an organizational change are not choosing to start that change, to create that change. They are a byproduct at best, or they are at the receiving end of a change that is imposed. What are some of the emotions that you see in clients as a result of that change being imposed?
You mean within the employees?
Yes, within teams, yeah.
Yeah, for the teams. Well, the emotions, oddly enough, were related to endings are actually questions related to continuation. Because when, we're doing, humans as a species, we're habitual. So we have the habit of doing things. We like to have some kind of structure. Work, and I wouldn't say career, it's just work, the daily job is such a big part of our life. Like this is where we get the money to provide for everything else that we love in our lives, but also where we get a lot of the status that we like to cling on. But it's also a big part of where we put our time into. When we say this is going to end, then I think the emotions are very much focused on, but what's going to happen to my my salary? How am I going to provide for my family? What does that mean for my career? Should I continue with this company? Should I not? Does it make sense for me? So a lot of the emotions, such as maybe as fears, even fears, I would say, are very much focused to how do I continue with my current lifestyle if that particular job will no longer be there for me, or that particular company, if in case of big merger where the company might be totally absorbed by something bigger. And emotions are often of mixed emotions. It can be fear and excitement, or concern, anxiety and excitement, let's say. It can be, oh, I was anyway thinking about starting something new. Can be of curiosity, can be of sadness. Oh, I really like my team. I didn't, so I'm really anxious of what might my new team be. But the anxiety, mostly fearing and anxiety that we talk when we mention big changes, when we talk about it, it's very much, to my experience, continuation. And that's connecting it to the closing, a conscious closing bit that an organization should have as a responsibility in big changes, is to provide information of how that continuation can happen for the employees. It's like, what are the mechanisms, what are the things they can do in order to ensure continuation continues, but that they can take advantage of whatever the organization provides as opportunities to continue with whatever is important to them.
Yeah, and there's a lot of uncertainty, right, in these sort of setups, whether there's an organizational restructure being announced or a merger. So the uncertainty is very high, and that links directly to what you're talking about. The questions are not necessarily about the ending, but maybe even more about the future, right? How will I continue? How will I manage the uncertainty? And what I'm hearing you say is, whilst companies don't always have all the details or are unable to share them, it's important that executive leadership plan intentionally and consciously for the transition of the employees. So there is some sort of design there to bring people from point A to point B by alleviating some of the pain associated with uncertainty. And I would say also maybe supporting people in navigating uncertainty, because things are never going to be 100% clear, certain, even after the announcement of a merger. Even after the details are known, there are still so many uncertainties and question marks about the industry, about the world, about people's personal lives. So the two elements here that I'm seeing is, one, how can leaders design intentionally for the transition to make it conscious? And then secondly, how can they support leaders and team leaders and individual team members to be okay with a certain level of uncertainty?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can build on that, just to unpack uncertainty a little bit more, often, you know, and a little bit like a philosophical perspective, when we say this is no longer to be the same, that's already certain. You know, you're certain about the ending. It's a very, change has a lot of dynamic to it. But you say no, whatever you know, whatever you're doing right now, it's not going to continue anymore. So that is actually a certain bit. But what happens afterwards brings all of these questions that create the sense of uncertainty. It's like, how am I going to continue for myself in having the life that I like? Ultimately, that's it, as a person, either within the organization or outside of it. And then it's a matter of that leadership or change management design or approach, I would say, that leaders are to orchestrate and to address the uncertainties or the questions that, of course, the organization has control over. Because a lot of the uncertainty that an employee would feel would be partly something that the organization can solve for them with better communication, with transparency, with, I don't know, even Q&A sessions, very simple techniques where they can provide that platform for employees to raise their questions related to an organization. And then based on also understanding what the semantics within the employees are, the organization might have already have answers to some of these questions, or might have to do some extra work to provide answer to other areas that they didn't preliminary thought of. But there's also part for the employee of uncertainty that is very private, and that would have a lot to do with their own decisions. Oh, they offer me a job, but do I want to take that job? What if I don't want to take it? And if I don't want to take it, then probably they'll be on their own to solve that bit of uncertainty. So it's a lot of layers, and we need to be also, I think, being conscious of the endings is also understanding that there are a lot of layers and different parties. The different parties within the change have different responsibilities in solving the different bits of uncertainty that will happen for the individual or on a bigger scale for the team.
Yeah. And naturally, as we're talking about endings and close, we tend to focus more on the negatives, right? On what is scary, what is uncertain, because as human beings, we are not designed to embrace change and be excited about it. We are designed to avoid change as much as possible and remain at the status quo. But I know that you have a different philosophy, and I have personally learned a lot from you and your mindset about how endings can be positive. Can you talk a little bit about that? How can we embrace endings as something that can serve us on a personal level and then within the context of organizational change?
It starts with understanding and accepting, actually, that endings are part of life. And some endings come planned, You know, for example, we all have been in high school, and you know that in 5 years high school you're going to finish and you have to go to university, and you have 5 years to think about, oh, how do I want to continue when high school finishes? Or when, for example, you have a big change to become a parent in your life, you have at least 9 months to prepare mentally for that. But endings and new beginnings are everywhere on every step of our journey called life. And I think it starts with that mindset, that ending is part of the journey. It's part of the new beginnings. And then it's how you look into the particular endings, because some endings you wouldn't want, like losing a person, losing a job you love. Even sometimes your manager, who you have great connections with, gets promoted, and that creates a bit of a shock, maybe, or initial, oh my God, what am I going to do? So for me, I would say two things. One is the acceptance that endings will happen for you. And they will be anywhere, everywhere. Having that mindset already puts you in a more constructive way, puts you in a position to look in endings in a more constructive way. And the second for me is breathe and take it in. In a way, it is, you will always be taken over its chemical reaction almost in our brains when you hear something surprising, to be like, oh, like almost like having that even physical reaction. Oh no, how, what, where? But this is your brain naturally perceiving, oh my God, something new is coming at me. I need time to analyze it, whether it's a good or bad. But what if you already, when you feel that feeling, you already tell yourself, oh, there's something great happening, or there's something new happening. Let me think about it. Let me not stress. Let me not shock. Let's look at it from almost a neutral perspective, because endings happen. So something new is coming up. Something old needs to be closed. And what is, let me breathe, take it in, and see what does it do for me. Is it positive? Is it negative? Or how can I make it positive? In a previous webcast, we talked about that actually there is a lot of opportunities in change, but we just needed a little bit more time. Ultimately, I think it's a matter of flexing that mindset that if it's part of life, then it's going to happen to me all the time. And I need to have my own ritual, my own approach to sitting with an ending. I think often denial comes, or the big part of anxiety comes when we become totally resistant, when we are like, we just don't want to accept, we don't want to even take it in. And that can be with big endings like death, but there's nothing I can do. And that's part of life, part of the thing. I want to rather put it in a positive perspective, that endings will happen. Yet ultimately, there's so much little we have power on, right? And it's not just whether you're religious or not, believing in higher powers like God, but just because we live on this planet with a billion other people, there will be a lot of things happening to us that are circumstantial, also from interacting with the environment outside of us, ourselves. So endings will happen, and it's a matter of developing a mechanism that works for us. And I would invite our audience to actually reflect, how can you as an individual manage endings consciously for yourself? It might be a different approach for everybody. Like for me, I would really breathe, and I feel I've developed that very strongly with myself, like breathe, take it in. I was like, okay, this is happening. What does it mean? What do I need to conclude? What do I need to start? What is not impacted and I can continue with? That is my approach. Yeah. Everyone might have a different approach, but it's having that conscious ending ritual, if you like, or conscious perception of that news that change is coming.
I love that you mentioned rituals. We'll get to that in a moment. But I wanted to share one of the insights, which I think it probably came from you actually, about coming to terms with the fact that endings are natural. Somebody once asked me, what would be the opposite of things not ending? And when I look at it that way, for example, I have a project that I'm working on that I absolutely love, or a client that I really enjoy spending time with. Well, if those relationships never ended, that would mean that for the next, I mean, if I don't know, 80 years, yeah, I'm going to live to be very old. For the next 80 to 100 years, I will be stuck with the same people doing the same thing. So when I think about endings in that way, they become a little bit more appealing. That actually, yes, an ending, whether I have chosen it or not, is an opportunity to wrap something up and to try something else in my career, in my life. So I think often we complain about losing something or having the end of something at work, whereas actually, if we continue that forever, we would still complain. So that's one little way that I position that. But in terms of endings and the concept of endings, I think one of the other things I hear from my clients is that when things close or end, clients sometimes feel that they are quitters, like they have given up, or the system has given up on them. So what's your view on conscious closing in relation to failure?
I personally don't believe in failure. I love actually word games, and I think failure actually is fail learn. It's very much related to learning. I think, but I can see it as like I've been part of many organizational changes. I've been part of that, sometimes independent or independent body in between the, let's say, employer, the leadership, and the organization, where I need to execute the change and sometimes have those difficult conversations with people. And all the emotions where I've put so much work and now I'm being made redundant, or that my department is totally closed. This is not right because the company is going to lose so much knowledge. All of that is usually true. And as much as we don't like it, sometimes, changes can be rough, can be tough, can be very, using a bit of a lingo, when you're trying to cut the fat, you also cut part of the meat. And people very easily would find it as like, oh, I'm not wanted. My work is not being appreciated. And you move into that. I wouldn't even say it a victim mode. It's really a redundant mode. It's like, oh, I'm irrelevant. And I find that this is even worse than victim mode, because in a victim, you can be angry. But in an irrelevant mode, you're indeed, oh, I'm a failure. I didn't manage to sell my job, or I didn't do good work. I'm not part of the chosen ones to stay. What I've seen from my experience with this sort of work is that every time, or let's say 9 out of 10 times, I haven't kept in touch with all of the people that I've supported, but for a majority of times, people end up being so much happier after a change, because often such turmoil, it's like, because it's almost like a bit of the retrospection that happens with this. You cannot feel like, oh, I failed. That immediately comes with like, what could I've done better? Is like, even if you're not make it conscious, like write it on paper or whatever, but you tend to get into that retrospection to yourselves, like, what didn't work for me? What could have been better? What what do I actually want or what I don't want from my next step. And I've seen people really rising after events like this with a different power, because there's something super powerful in reevaluating yourself, in redesigning sometimes yourself. And I find that when this happens, if it happens to you, I would say see it as a blessing, really as a blessing, because you're given opportunity to redefine your path forward instead of being or staying with something that anyway apparently you haven't been on the list, and not necessarily as you, but your role or the job, the kind of job you're doing, or your department is not part, it hasn't been seen as a priority of within that organization. There might be hundreds of reasons. And all of them will have good arguments, because organizations will not just simply cut something because they don't want to spend money on it. It has to make sense for their strategic direction. And if you find yourself in an environment, in an area of a business that is no longer perceived as, of that priority, then for sure it will be better for you to redefine yourself and find a better position. Because even if you stay, if you drag in some kind of form, ultimately the company have chosen a direction to go forward, and that might be, it could be that you're not anyway on the focus of development of some way. So I would really see it as a blessing, because big changes and big endings also bring a lot of big beginnings. And it's a matter of really having that conscious approach to, okay, so this is ending for me. I'm gonna feel all the emotions. I'm gonna take record of them. And I'm gonna rise stronger out of this, because I know what I'm capable of. I know all the good things that I have delivered. I know that I can deliver value to organizations that would value what I'm good at. And from organizational perspective, when I work with changes like this, I always advise the leaders to give a constructive story of when something has been discontinued. Because then it helps people to get that affirmation that it's not me. Because usually when you feel like you're quitting or you're being sort of a failure, this happens when you take it personally. In business, it's not personal. Very often, more often than not, it's not personal. It's just how the business decides to continue, and unfortunately, people stand behind that.
Super. All right, we've coming to the end of here. You've mentioned a couple of things that are a little bit like ritual. For example, reflecting on what has been, redefining your path. If anybody's interested in more rituals, please drop us a note and we can share them in the comments. But I would like to summarize the five key points that I am taking away from your insight, Tanya. Number one, conscious closing is not just about designing the new chapter, but it's about facilitating the employee transition. Number two, team concerns related to endings are often about concerns related to continuation and the future. Number three, embrace the mindset that endings are a natural part of life. Number four, conscious closing is about failing and learning, and then failing and learning again. And number five, endings are a great time to pause, reflect, and redefine your path. And with that, I thank you for the insights. There's so much more to be said, but in the spirit of conscious closing, we are very consciously going to close this call. For everybody watching live or the recording, follow me and Tanya on LinkedIn and drop us a message if you want to subscribe so that you never miss an episode of these webinars. And we answer all questions. I can see there's a comment there here from Ryan. Thanks, great talk, nice perspective. Change as I made redundant now. Sorry to hear that. And actually, maybe I'm not sorry. I'm excited for you, Ryan. So thanks for your comments. Do post some comments if you have any questions. We do go through all of them. Thanks very much and see you next month.
Thank you.